Mirror: migration-related risks caused by misconceptions of opportunities and requirement.
In text and speech. Another thing that we found very useful is that you have not only this one-step interaction with content, but that you also can observe situations, so that you set up a situation and you observe it over a certain time, which is again, of course, based on filtering technology, but it would also in a way capsule your current interest or your certain different settings of interest that you want to take a look into. And then there's, of course, also technology for social media analysis, because social media today plays a very strong role in forming perception and understanding of the world. Then, as there's also a lot of other technology, I will not go through all the details here, but what I also want to mention, what we also built is an experimental support for perception analysis, and that's based in interdisciplinary work on perception modeling and understanding how perception works, put together with possible technology. And that looks into things like behavior, attitude, control, correlated concepts, and to see how all of them work together. And if you want to learn more about that in detail, you should best speak with Aitana, because she's our expert on that in the team. I'll now take you through some example technologies, but not in too much depth, because there will be still a presentation on that today later. Just to give you a little bit of an idea of the technologies that we developed in the project, we improved visual content, the concept detection based on general approaches to try to detect in images concepts that are relevant for search. That could, for example, be that you want to see all the pictures with a tent on it, all the pictures showing conflicts. So there's a lot of things that could be extracted and then are searchable, because the picture in itself, of course, does not lend itself to such concept questions that go beyond search me a blue picture, for example. Then we also worked on the detection of migration-related semantic concepts. They are based on existing terminology. We built up a structure of migration-related concepts that are relevant in the context of migration. You see some examples above, like medical care or political instability. And we try to build technology for text as well as for images to be able to extract such concepts from the content and then be able to search based on these concepts again. Then we more advanced. We also built technology for visual sentiment analysis. That's a little bit depicted in the pictures on the right below, where you can see that the system tries to find out if for one concept there are more negative or more positive pictures, which is of course also something that influences perception a lot, which type of pictures are used in a certain context. We understand these technologies not to be taken in isolation and to say that's the perfect annotation of this picture now. We rather see them as enablers for more advanced search and filtering technology. It, for example, enables you, when you use the system, to find content with pictures showing boats, which might be relevant in a migration context, especially when you look at the Mediterranean route. Then there is also technology that looks in the spreading of information and misinformation. There is technology that analyzes content to see if it speaks about EU topics. That's based on named entity and context, also with training data sets. Then there is detection of if some content comes from bots. As you know, there's in the social media, there's also a lot of activity on fake accounts that try to influence public opinion that are not really humans, but they are machines that do things. And there we did quite some work to understand, to try to identify automatically bots that use account properties, behavior of bots, and also to try to get to see that content, if content is automatically generated. And then there is also work on hate speech, which of course also is a way to spread misinformation, and that looks at orthographic features, word embedding, but also hate dictionaries. So as you see, there's a different aspects of this perception influencing are analyzed with technology in the system. And since all these single building blocks are not very useful if they are not combined, they have been integrated into the mirror system. This is just one screen number of it that strongly supports filtering. And for all the details, I would like to point you to the demonstration of the mirror system this afternoon, which will be presented by Francesco from the UX company, together with other colleagues from the project. However, and I think you're all aware of that, this is not just a technology topic. So I want to also share a little bit what we did beyond technology in the project. For one, we look on theoretical foundations. That was mainly done by our partner in University of Vienna. And the idea there was that they took theoretical already existing models and extended them into a migration communication model, which looks into how information and perception in a way influences migration decision. It looks at the interaction between ability and aspiration, on the role of feedback that somebody who wants to migrate gets, and also gets in all the way, on the location and consumption of information and the forming of perception, and how this again influences migration decisions. This is the most important thing, is that to really understand that this is a circular process, that there is not the one point where decisions are taken, but this is in a way a continuous feedback loop. And I want to point here, for if somebody is really interested in digging deeper in that, I want to point to the deliverable 8.1 from the Mirror project, which reports on this model, also on the underlying literature, and also how this was formed and how exactly this is to be understood. Then we also did as foundations fieldworks on perception and media use. This was quite challenging because it finished in June 2021. This means the fieldwork was completely done during the pandemic, which added some extra challenges to doing this. Still, we were able to do this in a way that is safe for everybody, and we really took a lot of effort to really make this also safe for everybody involved. So research focus is on perception of EU and its migration policy, also on the use of information sources and digital communication before and during the migration process, and as a special track also to the role of media in the migration process, which also includes gender differences. The interviews were done in a diverse set of interviews. We took different state of migration in migration context, also different countries. We did interviews in 6 countries. There were overall 180 interviews with refugees and migrants. 36 of them female, 64 male. The lower representation of females was due to the fact that this was difficult to get a balanced thing, because it's often not so easy to motivate females to participate in such interviews, also given the cultural background of many of the refugees, the migrants. There was this resulted in about 80 hours of audio that was transcribed and translated and is now under analysis. And we will see first selected results in the presentation of Katrin Braun from Fremde werden freuen in panel 3 of our report. I do not have here any statistic highlighting anything, because this is really qualitative research, which means it's not about putting together numbers, but really to look digging deep into individual interviews. And that's why we moved that really to a separate session. Then as an extra thing that we also took a lot of effort in is to really embed law and ethics deeply into the system. There was, from the very beginning of the development, a very strong interaction with a team doing law and ethics, a team from University of Groningen in the Mirror project, and to get that right from the beginning, because the understanding is there's no point in building the system and then finding out that it's legally or ethically questionable. So we had all the time a data processing impact analysis, which discussed with all the technology development, what would be ethical or also legal impacts of doing things, and also seeing things, how they could be differently. We had this ethics analysis, which used this very nice, or developed also this very light traffic light representation, which marked things that were found to be okay, but also things that were found to be a bit tricky, and also things that really are ethical concerns. And that was a very clear option to very clearly communicate to the technology partner that something
recording in progress.
And then we also looked a bit deeper. We just legal frames, but also there was a work on a human rights checklist to also see which of the things have to be considered if you build such a system where there might be human rights implications. And here we have Jonida from our team in the conference, or whatever you want to discuss something there in more detail, that might be helpful to discuss this with her, because I have a technology and not a legal background, actually. Then, as a final point, I want to also point out that there is also societal aspects considered. There is we did, because this is also important, not to only say this is legally and ethically safe, but also to see if such a system is societally acceptable. And we did some societal aspects in this. I just want to highlight two of them. For one, we did really a project internal awareness raising and discussion for potential gender bias. That's something, especially in using AI methods. That's something I have to confess, we technologists normally don't do so much. So I think it was really also a very exciting exercise for us to really look into, for example, possible bias in data set, to see how the collection process could be biased towards some aspects, to also see if there's bias in data processing, in the way data is aggregated, because we typically work with aggregation data because we are not tracking down individuals, but we really look at more high-level trends and aggregated things, and also to see if bias can be also introduced by user search. So it was a very broad consideration on how, in such a context where data is collected, analyzed, processed by AI methods, and made available to search and filtering, can influence gender bias. And wherever we found something, we also tried to see how mediation processes could be. This cannot be always completely avoided, because also some sources, like for example, social media sources, have a certain gender bias because there is a unbalance between female and male users of systems. And on the other hand, we also didn't want to work, because that's exactly what you ethically could not do, to track down who is female, who is male, because we didn't want to look into that. So there are also some limits on what can be done here. And then there was also a development of a model of societal acceptance that was based on 16 factors that are grouped in different groups. And there is also was a consolidation of the model together with experts. And this will be presented by our colleagues from K&I, Daniele, who will present that in panel 4, I think, tomorrow in the program. So, summarizing the findings on a very high level, I would say the following, that what we learned is that perception analysis is definitively a very demanding task. Also due to the fact that there are very complex mechanisms in place for forming perception. And in addition, if you also look, what we also want to do is to look in behavior triggered by perception. It gets even more complicated because, of course, behavior is also influenced by a lot of other individual factors besides the information that you consume. Then we also understand that there's a wide variety of automated media analysis technologies required to support this task, and that you also have to tailor this very carefully, that it's really helpful for these tasks. And also that we understand that this is not it is important not to limit to technology, but also to understand from the very beginning the ethical and legal framing, to also consider findings from the fieldwork in the shaping of the technologies, to early consideration, as I already said, legal and ethical foundations, and also to keep societal aspects in mind. And that's it, my short summary on the mirror results. And this is contact. Of course, more information can be found on our webpage. And of course, we are also in the meetings. There are quite some people from the Mirror project. So if you want to discuss something more daily, you might also speak with them while you are there.